Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of The Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week we have a good friend of mine who I met in Australia called Emily. And Emily works for a charity called Waves of Wellness, and they are a surf therapy charity. So she studied psychology, but has a general interest in mental health and people's general wellness, and currently works as a surf therapist, which, again, not really much of an idea of what that is. I can have a guess. And a quick research does actually show that there is that surf therapy going on in the UK, but I'm sure you'll have to know a little bit more about what that actually involves, right, Jamie?
Yeah, definitely. It's massively something different. We can definitely call it a path less chosen. It sounds quite an innovative way of approaching therapy. And I think particularly now in 2024, with everyone's approach to mental health, having read the Waves of Wellness website, I think it's fantastic that they're trying to break down these barriers and stigma just from doing some kind of movement and really fascinating exercise. So to have made a career of doing something so interesting, I think should make for a very good podcast episode. So definitely looking forward to hearing what she has to say.
Yeah, spot on. Couldn't agree more. Definitely an interesting topic and good career. So let's get her on. Emily, great to have you on. If you could just give us a little bit of detail about what you're actually up to right now.
Hi guys. I'm very excited to be here. So right now I'm working as a surf therapist in Sydney. Help people who want to improve their well-being, and we kind of go from talking about mental health on the sand, and then we go into like more of like a surfing component, and it lasts around like 8 weeks. And so we've got lots of different programs, so people from like youth groups or school groups to veterans and women who have experienced like domestic violence. So we take them down to the beach, lots of different beaches in Sydney. And yeah, we go from there, which is cool.
What is the idea behind surf therapy? The normal therapy within four walls is kind of maybe a bit old-fashioned or doesn't work for a lot of people, and that this is in terms of like an active way of making people face their problems, this might be a better way of going about it.
Yeah, so the idea of like surf therapy is that, you know, it's just making like a new way to kind of talk about mental health, and it is very different from traditional therapy. Like, I don't think it's every day that you kind of sit in wetsuits and like talk about mental health. So it is like, it's not new because it's always been around. Like, I mean, it might not have been recognized as like a formal way of therapy until quite recently, but since like surfing kind of began, like all the components that come along with surfing, like being really mindful and kind of like taking like yourself out of like being like, for example, people who are like depressed, they spend a lot of time inside, kind of helping them to like find a outlet to like go outside and like kind of enjoy different benefits from like being in the natural environment. I guess it like did kind of start because the traditional way of therapy, you know, it doesn't work for everyone. Like, it works for some people, which is so great for them. I guess it's just like finding like a new kind of way to help reach people that doesn't work for. And yeah, so I think that's kind of how it started, or became more like formally recognized in a way.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So has it been like formally recognized by science? I guess like from someone, an outsider looking in, like we hear about like the development of therapy in like various ways, especially in the last like decade or so, where mental health's become such an important thing. Is this part of like a new like pioneering way of approaching therapy for people?
So it is recognized as like a way of doing therapy, and it does have like a lot of evidence behind it to support that it is like an accepted way of therapy. I think maybe just because it is different to what like the traditional way of like viewing therapy is, like think that's different. Like people are always going to be really skeptical around it or unsure of like how it kind of works. And so I think that's still probably like in the pipeline of it being like really accepted by everyone. But I guess our like world is like constantly changing, and so you never know, like in like 20 years time it might be just as recognized as like CBT or other kind of modalities of therapy.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting as someone who I like have spoken about therapy and mental health before. I think it's so interesting that you know that therapy is such a big thing, but people never speak about the fact that movement is so important, which is why, although when you said to me about surf therapy, I had no idea what that actually looked like in practice. Like the actual concept of it to me makes a lot of sense, because actually getting people speaking while they're doing things, I think some of the best conversations I've had with friends have been over runs or on the side of rugby pitches, as opposed to kind of sitting down face to face with a coffee. So do you think it's a way that some people who conventional therapy wouldn't work for to actually open up a bit better? And have you seen that within the classes?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, my boss, or like the CEO of like Waves of Wellness, which is the surf therapy charity that I'm working for, like he originally started it because he was working with a client who really wasn't responding well to like one-on-one therapy, and he had been like a surfer before experiencing kind of mental health challenges. And what like my boss like really found, because he took the leap or like took the risk and ended up taking this guy surfing, and what he found was it just like opened up another side to his client, and like felt more comfortable to like be speaking about the challenges that he was facing outside of that room and actually like in the ocean. And I guess that's a really similar thing that I've noticed with the people that we've worked with so far, is there can be like a lot of anxiety around speaking about mental health. And at the start of our programs, everyone is very like kind of apprehensive. I mean, also respect that like the idea of like being on the beach and surfing can also bring on a bit of anxiety as well. At the start, everyone is a little bit apprehensive, a bit anxious, like unsure. And then by the end of the 8 weeks, like they really have opened up a lot and like connected with the rest of the group. And I think it's also like really special because they're not only trusting enough to facilitate like conversations around mental health, but there's also like another layer of them trusting us to like not lose them out in the ocean, or maybe not lose them, but like to take care of them in the ocean as well, which I really do think creates like a deeper bond like between, I guess, like the clients and like therapists in a way, because like they're trusting you on so many different levels. In my experiences when I was training for clinical psychology, while I was still able to like develop rapport with clients like quite easily, like it is a lot different now in like the surf therapy kind of space.
I'm interested to hear like how do you like go about building this rapport? What are like the key bits to approaching these conversations to then facilitate people actually talking to you about some of the most important things in their lives?
For me, I feel like what really helps to facilitate that kind of vulnerability in a way is in our first week. Like I think that's probably the most important week, because that is kind of where we're like sharing what we do with them, and like probably for the first time. Like I don't think there's many people who have done surf therapy before the first session. I think a lot of it really is about like over communication and really like talking about like surf therapy in general, and like what the aim is there and like what the evidence behind that is, but also like talking about our organization and like talking about our values and kind of our vision for where we want to go and like what we really hope people get out of that experience. And then I think I feel like naturally, like being down at the beach, some people at least, like it is like a very like non-pressured environment. Like as you said before, you've got like the waves in the background, like people are playing with sand, and like you're looking at whatever is occurring on the beach. And I think all of those things like really does help. Like that sensory kind of aspect of it like really helps to calm people. And the first week we tell them that like participation isn't about coming down here every week and like really talking about everything that's going on for them. Like sometimes they might like come down and if all they want to do is listen and sit there, like that's okay as well. Like that counts as participation for us too. And I think something else that really helps is we, the facilitators, are also like vulnerable, obviously within within our capacity. Like we're not going to come down and maybe share like our biggest life challenge, but we do like share a part of the challenges that we've been through as well to really help build that connection between the group and like kind of set like the tone for what the expression sessions are, or like what they're about in a way.
Interesting. So almost moving on to how you got into this position. So how do you learn? I mean, I think, you mentioned you did psychology at university. What got you into a position where you feel qualified to have those conversations? What was your journey to that point?
So I guess like formally, I studied a Bachelor of Arts and majored in sociology and psychology, and then like went on to do honours in psychology, and then was accepted into the clinical psychology training program, and then also completing my master's at the moment in psychology. I guess for me, like my journey with like mental health or like studying mental health didn't start at university. Like it started a lot or way before that, experiencing my mum like really like struggle with her own mental health and with alcohol addiction. I think, although it is like formally recognised, or like I've got the formal qualifications from uni, I think the study of mental health happened way before that. And I guess it, like naturally I was drawn towards psychology because, I find people so fascinating, and I've always had like a kind of natural affinity to like being really like empathetic, and usually always the person that like my friends go to for like their own struggles, and just like random people down the road just like really disclosing what's happening for them to me. I think definitely with my family's like struggles with mental health and losing my mum at 15, I think those pretty like significant life events really kind of made me focus on what I really value, or like what my purpose is that I want to focus on. Have just really like gone with what I've been like interested in and like passionate about. And I feel like it was more when I went to university, like I had no idea what I wanted to study really. Like I knew I wanted to study psychology because I did find that really interesting, but I did like so many other papers and like wasn't really decided on what I wanted to do exactly. But I guess like when I went into my first psychology class and just like realized how interested and like immersed within that content I was, and how like when I was reading about it or studying it or doing assignments, like it didn't feel like a chore. Like it felt really like I was so curious and like, overreading or like going down rabbit holes that was probably not really the focus of the assignment. But yeah, I think just that general like interest was kind of what really like led me to taking it more seriously and like wanting to devote more of my time to that. And then I guess like maybe it was in my third year when I like heard about clinical psychology, and I knew at that point that I did really want to like work as a therapist or within that like therapy kind of realm. And I guess like with like my past experiences and family mental health struggles, I guess that kind of also meant that like I wasn't really afraid to like be in like dark spaces like with other people, because I could really like empathize and understand struggles that, well, maybe not fully understand, but I could imagine like the struggles that they were also going through.
I find it so interesting that there's this kind of like underlying situation that's happened to you that may cause like that genuine personal interest in what the subject is, as well as also helping you maybe perform well at it. Do you think there's that aspect to it, or do you think it's just that you're naturally a very compassionate person and that's why looking into psychology and mental health is something that comes to you? Or do you think it's really the situation that happened with your mum that underpinned the interest and love for it?
I think it's both. Like I think, you know, the past experience of like losing my mum and seeing her struggle with mental health, and then also, you know, having traits of like being really empathetic and understanding, and like I guess willing to like sit in dark spaces with other people. I think it's like a combination of both of those, and as well as like being good at it, I guess. Like it kind of just like reaffirms that like that was what I was interested in, and kind of like the path that I did want to go down. And I honestly, and I hadn't actually thought about doing any other job, like aside from working with people and like being in that kind of therapy space or like mental health space. I mean, I was a little bit confused on like and uncertain around like what I wanted to do at the start of university. I'm taking very random subjects, but I think that also helped to like reaffirm that like what I did want to do was to go down the psychology, mental health kind of pathway.
Yeah, definitely. I find it really interesting. I picked up on what you said a few minutes ago about like even when you were just studying psychology, you never felt it was like a chore. And I think to hear like the kind of way that you speak about what you're doing now, you would struggle to find anyone that speaks with that kind of passion of about office job that they work 9 to 5 like every day. You know, it wouldn't just possibly happen. So I'm really interested to hear like, I guess that you recognize in yourself that you had these traits of empathy and that you might be good at doing something like this. So was it always a question of why would I ever chase money over passion and fulfillment?
I think, yeah, my dad, a very, you know, my biggest support person and like greatest role model. He always said to me to, you know, if you're doing what you love when you work, then like it's never going to feel like work. And so I feel like I took that in full stride, and you know, and I think being like happy and like passionate about what you're doing is really important to me. It's worth like its weight in gold to me, rather than like pursuing something for like financial reasons or like aspirations, which is like completely fine, and like I know other people do that, and that's them, and like that's okay, that's what they want to do.
I think that's a really good answer and like a really nice message to hear. That's the whole purpose of this podcast, really, is so that people can hear that you don't have to just go and work a job in the city for money, basically. What I'm interested in then, to play like a bit of a devil's advocate, is there anything that like tempts you? Do you ever see like sometimes, I guess some of your friends are probably doing the jobs we're talking about. Do you ever see that and think maybe I should go into something like that? Or do you always think you would be, you know, you'd be mad to leave something you're this passionate about?
I think that's also the very like beautiful thing about being in your 20s, is that everyone is doing so many different things, and I think it is a really easy time to compare like your situation to other people's situations, and I think it can be hard like to not think about the what if and to go down that kind of and when I do like notice myself doing that, like of course I do like compare myself to my friends or like people that I know, which is super easy to do. I think for me, it's about, redirecting myself back to my own values, and what I really value is like connection with others, and, and helping other people and doing what I love, and like just following those kind of values, and like what my dad also has like instilled in me about doing what you love, and really just like focusing on being happy, I guess.
Yeah. No, again, a brilliant message. I think so many people listening to this will definitely start like doing some kind of like introspection there. Like when you say you return to your own like personal values, I think that's something that's so important. And a lot of people maybe listening would think, yeah, the job that I'm doing doesn't align with my personal values. So what would your advice be, particularly for someone if they are in their 20s and still like their career is not particularly settled? What would you say to someone that's maybe thinking that and questioning, can I go and do a different career that is in line with my values?
I think it does take a lot of knowing yourself and knowing what really like sparks or like ignites the fire like within your belly, and like that's going to be different from either your friends or Tom, Joe, and Harry like down the road. It really does come back to like, trying to know yourself, and it's like a continuous journey. Like what I value right now will be different to what I value in like 10 years time, or like 5 years time, or like a year's time. But just kind of taking that stock take of like who you are, what you're passionate about, what your values are right now, and then, if it's not really aligning with like what you're doing at the moment, obviously not trying to make any rash decisions, but to kind of like sit with that and, just think about like what other options there could be out there. I read like a really amazing book that helped me kind of embrace change when I felt like I was really at rock bottom, and it was called 20-something Manifesto, and it was such a great book. And I think the whole concept of that book was to really like open up your world, and that you do have like so many different options available to you, and like just because you've studied a certain thing or we're focused on one direction doesn't mean that you have to be or like follow that direction or pathway for the rest of your life. Like people live so many different lives in one lifetime, and it's actually like really exciting to embrace change and be a bit risky, I guess. But it all comes back to knowing what your values are and like what makes you happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think it's such a refreshing take on it, because I don't know if it's the same down under, but particularly here in the UK, a lot of people are defined by like what their job is. Like I've sold it a video on it recently where like actually when you start speaking to someone, they'll define themselves by what they're doing as their career. Whereas actually the approach that you're taking to it is you understand your values first, and then you've shaped your career around that. So yeah, very refreshing. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. And it's also mental to hear that Jamie actually watches my videos. So that's nice to hear for once. But yeah, no, 100% agreed. And it's I think you were definitely one of the people that I first remember speaking to and hearing that it's not actually a kind of money and fame and ego chasing career that you have to have. And that
I feel like, there's definitely people in New Zealand and Australia who are more of like the, yes, like I'm not saying that they're not like values driven, because they've just got like a different set of values. But I think it just like depends on like person to person and like your upbringing. Like I guess for me, having like quite a difficult and like rough like upbringing, then that kind of, maybe led to a bit of like serious introspection at a really young age. And I guess, yeah, I think from there it was more of like what is important to me. And, I've experienced like really low lows, but I've also experienced really high highs. And I think, our time is so limited, not to get so like heavy, but our time really is so limited. And, I heard that you spend like a third of your time or a third of your life working. And so for me, I don't want to be doing something that I'm not passionate about or like don't love, or like that isn't aligned with my values, because if a third of your life is working, then I want to make use of that time, and to, when I'm like 80 years old, like I can reflect back and know that everything I did was really honest and like truthful to myself and what I was really passionate about, rather than like maybe following something else that I did for like the reasons, I suppose.
Yeah, so interesting. With that in mind, what does the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years look like? What's your plans there?
I think for me, it's really hard to think of where I'm going to be in, 5 years' time, let alone like 1 year's time. I feel like I've always really surprised myself at where I am from 1 year to the next. Just comes back to that we're always like growing and like constantly changing. But I think in like a year's time, I would really like to be still going like full steam ahead with surf therapy, and I'm really like loving my role at the moment. I think I'll always want to be, working in the natural environment or like by the ocean, because I've always had that kind of connection to the ocean. And I think, I just can't imagine, for me personally, like working inside all the time. So I hope that I'm outside doing something like surf therapy. But I don't really know. Maybe a bit more traveling would be cool. But I definitely, I see myself within the surf therapy space for a little while longer.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, to be honest, because having heard you speak with like such passion about it, and quite clearly, I think you're probably one of the guests that we've heard speaks with such fondness about what they're actually doing. It would have been a real shame if you had said, "Oh, I'm planning on leaving it in a couple of years." So I'm very glad you said that. But really interesting to listen to. Just to finish off with our final question, then, which every guest gets asked. We'd just be interested if you were going to go back to a time, perhaps when you were 15, and the awful event has just occurred, or perhaps when you've just left university and gone straight into the surf therapy. On one of those timescales, if you just had to do one thing the same, one thing differently, and that one thing that you would tell yourself to motivate yourself.
I'll do the same as, I guess, like following my heart. And I feel like I've stayed really true to myself and everything that I've done. But I think following my heart in the way that I knew I wanted to be in Australia, I knew I wanted to go into surf therapy, and into my surf therapy role, like it wasn't easy. Like I had to ask if I could do my master's from a distance in Australia, but I knew that's what I really wanted to do. So I made sure that I like asked my supervisor, or maybe like convinced him to let me come here. And I think I actually I find the what I'd do different question like really hard. I think because I am really happy with where I am at the moment, and even in light of like the different kinds of like adversities that I faced, like with losing my mum, or like kind of learning in like a really challenging environment with clinical psych. I think it's hard, although it can be easy to think of things that you do differently. Like all of those things happened and like led me to this point. And I know that sounds really like cliche. I do like really believe in that. But I do think if I did have to do something different, I think with clinical psychology, I wouldn't have like pushed myself so much to try and force something that like wasn't really meant for me at the time. I would have maybe looked back at like how, or like what my values were, and if what I was doing was aligning with those, and maybe had have like paused and like finished my clinical psych training earlier. And without that experience, like I wouldn't have ended up in Australia or, you know, gone on a whim and like applied for surf therapy. So it is hard, but if I did have to think of something different that I'd do, that would probably be it. And then something that I'd tell myself to motivate myself, I feel like it would probably be embracing change, and especially at like the end of not completing clinical psychology, it felt like my world was really small at the time because that was like the only thing that I really wanted to do at that time, and like couldn't imagine myself doing anything differently. I guess that was like a really formative moment because it made me realize that, you know, when you're kind of at that point and you don't really have a lot to lose and you can really be more like risky. I guess that's like also what like led me to Australia and like really leaning on surfing as like a career.
Brilliant.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's like it's so perfectly summed up. Thank you so much, Emily. Very appreciative of you. I knew it was going to be good when I invited you, but I think it's so clear that everything you do is so purpose and like value driven, which I think is why it's so inspiring to listen to you, because of the fact that you have that belief system and you do everything that way, and there's no external pressures that you really let you sway off that. So thank you for speaking so candidly about that, and yeah, couldn't have gone better. So very appreciative of your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I do find it very weird to be like interviewed rather than like not interviewing, but like talking about other people. So that's been a challenge that I've reflected on from this conversation, but
you did really well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, fascinating to listen to Emily there. So good just to hear how much she loves what she's doing, and obviously that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is she's doing something she's interested in and has a career that she loves, rather than one that's just sat behind an office all day that she wouldn't be able to speak with such passion about. And that kind of links into my first key takeaway. So I'll put it out there first, that similarly to what you put out on your Instagram and your TikTok the other day about the fact that it seems in England a lot of people define themselves around what their job is before anything else. And something that I found really interesting that she did is she did a massive introspection first. She had like a proper understanding and like comprehended exactly what her own personal individual values were, and then has shaped her career around that. And I think that idea that defining yourself first before then selecting your career is the right way around to do it, rather than going into a career and then letting that define you. So I thought that was a brilliant message from her.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Having that like introspection, and I think it's something that we don't really do in the UK at all, is thinking about what motivates you and then like doing your career from that way, as opposed to thinking like, what do my mates do? What do people I know do, that sort of way. And I think like speaking to her, it's so clear that we don't do that. Love that. Okay, so my takeaway would be, she mentioned this quite a lot, which is that you actually don't have to see a career as a fixed 60-year thing, and that actually in the like modern day you can really define your values, as you say, but have a career that dots around and goes into so many different angles, and you can take a lot more risks because of that, because you can have all those different careers. And she said like the 20s are the best part about your 20s is you can take those risks. And I think that's really refreshing, because some people feel like what they start doing at 22 is what's going to define them when they're 65. And actually Emily had a great perspective of saying like, I love this, I'm going to do this, and actually in 10 years time I don't need to think about what I'm doing, because I know that my values will guide me in a way that means that I love what I'm doing every day. So to sum that up, I'd say making sure that you know, or knowing that a career isn't for life. It's just it can be a facet of loads of different interests and hobbies you have combined into one.
Yeah, definitely. That was going to be my second point. I think the exact quote that she used was, she described it as the beauty of the 20s, is that you're able to do like these things that are different. And I love that idea. You know, she kind of suggested that in these 10 years between 20 and 30, maybe even beyond that, you have an opportunity just to experiment, see what you enjoy. Don't tie yourself down into a career that you're not going to enjoy, because this is the kind of time where you can be flexible and do the stuff you enjoy. So hopefully the majority of the demographic of our listeners will be able to resonate with that and actually just make the most of being at this age where you don't have to lock something in that's going to be longer term. I do have a third one as well, though, which I'll go for. Which it was less of like a message to everyone else, but I think a really important takeaway in how she spoke about what she does is she takes a lot of pride. She said it right from the start and probably right to the finish as well, in being like a positive outlet for people. I found it amazing that someone can just be so willing to like take on the burdens of other people. She said like even for her neighbours and other people that live on the street, they all come to her and she's the person that they want to go to. And then through that, she gives them like confidence, a sense of achievement. She listed a load of things that she clearly is so proud that she's able to have that empathetic character where she's able to do that for other people. And I think that's amazing. And she's managed to make a career out of it. So fair play to her.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's a great takeaway, both in a way to find a career that you love, but also a way to just enjoy and live a fulfilling and happy like life, and being able to kind of share people's problems and help with people's problems. Like, I think that beats sitting at a desk, any sort of like horrible job that you hate. Just actually having that in within your life is gonna really propel you forward in career and personal aspects as well. Spot on. Do you want to sum those three up?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so to sum up those three then, the first one is knowing yourself and allowing your values to shape your career. The second one is the beauty of your 20s and being flexible and knowing a career is not forever. And the third one is taking pride in being the person that people go to for help.
Yeah, very well summed up, mate. Couldn't agree more, and very, very happy to have met Emily in Australia and also discussed her career and her life with her. So yeah, very happy I got on, and hope you enjoyed as well, Jamie.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I said it in the podcast. I don't think we've had someone speak with such passion and love for what they're doing. So very glad we had her on.
Yeah, spot on. Okay, well, her company that she works for is called Waves of Wellness, and they're based in Sydney. So check them out if you're ever around Sydney or in Australia. Then check them out and give them a follow on social media. If you want to support them by sharing or giving a bit of money, then I'm sure they'd be very appreciative as well. And in general, appreciate the support of the podcast, and we will be back next week with another exciting guest.
Perfect. See you next week.